Hey guys, in this module, I want to talk about the first step in rebuilding your relationship and in turning things around and building a relationship that's going to last. And that first step is what I call be the man. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that it's not all your fault that you are where you are. Relationships are co-created, and the situation you're in right now is a combination of things that both of you have done or not done. So it's not all your fault. However, it is your responsibility to lead your family forward. That's the role that God gave to you as a man, is to lead your family. When Eve partook of the fruit in the garden, who did God come looking for afterwards? He came looking for Adam. Even though Eve was the first one to take the fruit, he came to Adam because he had left Adam in charge. And Adam didn't fulfill his role. He most likely just sat passively by and watched his wife talk with the serpent. And then when she came to Adam and said, "Hey, you know what? I think it's kind of a good idea. God, I know God said no, but the serpent makes a lot of sense. I think we ought to do it." And I think Adam probably said something like, "Hey, you know whatever makes you happy, honey." He just went along with it. But who did God come after? Came after Adam. Because again, Adam was the one in charge. And so it's not all your fault, but it is your responsibility. All right, let's dive in. 1 Corinthians 16:13 says, "Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." So, what do I mean by be the man? I mean, be the man that God created you to be. Be the man that your wife needs and wants you to be. The man that your wife would want to rebuild a relationship with and build a better future with. Right? If you're like a lot of the men that I've worked with, maybe trust has been broken. Maybe for years she's been talking about needing some change. And for years, maybe you've tried, but haven't followed through. And she's lost trust in you now that you're even capable of being that man. She needs to regain trust in you. That's a lot of what this first step is about becoming that man that she trusts again. Be the man that you'd want your sons to grow up to become someday. And be the man that someday you'd want your daughters to grow up to marry. Ask yourself, like seriously, if your daughter married, if you have daughters, but if your daughter married a man who looked just like you, acted just like you, how would you feel about that? Let's dive into a little bit more of what the four core characteristics of that man, of the unwavering husband. What are those? First one is courage. And I'll tell you, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking action despite fear. It's doing things that you're afraid of. Humility. Humility is about accepting that you don't have it all figured out. It's accepting that you have some shortcomings. It's accepting that you've played a role in the situation that you're in. Whether it's directly things that you've actually done, or if it's just maybe things that you've allowed to happen because you've been passive. Meekness. Now we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into each one of these things, but meekness was one that I was confused about. And again, I'll share more about what that actually means, but power under control is what meekness is. And then finally, grit. Passion. Grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. And If you watch the Do Not Give Up module, one of the hardest things of this process is that you will reach a point where you want to give up, where you're not sure you can continue on, where you're not sure it's even worth it to continue. Having grit means that you push through even when you want to give up. Because the transformation, the breakthroughs, those all happen on the other side of wanting to give up. When she sees that you keep going at the point where she's used to you giving up, that's where she's going to start to see some change. When you see yourself pushing through where you wanted to give up, that's where you're going to begin to build some confidence in yourself, to realize that you are capable of doing more than you thought you were. That's what grit's about. So let's dive into each one of these individually. Courage. Joshua 1:9. This is God talking to Joshua as Joshua's taking over after Moses. It was a big calling for Joshua to step into. He became the leader of the Israelites, and he was afraid. So God said to him, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Right? Have courage because I'm with you, is what God is saying. And if God is with you, who can be against you? You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You don't have to necessarily find courage in yourself and in your own strength, but find courage in knowing that God is by your side. And again, courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action despite the fear. John Wayne said it this way: courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. That is what courage is about doing the things that you're afraid of. And I'm going to tell you that fear is one of the biggest reason why we don't do the things that we should be doing. It's because we're afraid. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of how she might respond. We're afraid of making things worse. We're afraid that if we try and we fail, it's just going to prove that we're not good enough. And what happens if you continue to act out of fear? You continue to neglect the things you should be doing because you're afraid. It's not going to get any better. Talk about humility. 2 Corinthians 12:9-10 said, "But he said to me," and this is Paul talking about what Christ said to him. Okay. "But he said to me, Christ said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And Paul says, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And that sounds counterintuitive, right? When I'm weak, then I'm strong. That doesn't make any sense. Because when you're weak, and when you admit that you're weak, and when you actually get to the point where you surrender to God and you say, "God, I can't do this on my own. I thought I had it all figured out. Thought I knew what I need to do. Everything I try just fails. I don't got this on my own. God, I need you." That's when you open that door and you let him in. That's when you include him in this battle. You don't have to have all this figured out. You can't do it on your own. And that's okay. Neither do I. It took me a long time to figure that out. I thought that I had to have it all figured out. I'm the man. I should have it all figured out, right? feels like less of a man if I admit that I don't have it all figured out. What kind of a man am I? You're just like the rest of the men if you don't have it figured out. Strength comes when you accept your weaknesses and you reach out for help. Having humility helps you have strength because you stop trying to rely on your own power and you start relying on the power of the one who never fails. All right, how about meekness? Matthew 5:5 says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Most people confuse meekness with weakness. They rhyme. Meekness is often used along with words like gentleness and kindness, right? It sounds like a passive thing, right? If you're meek, then you're passive or you're timid. But the true meaning of meekness is power under control. You see that word meek, the original Greek word, described the process of turning a wild stallion into a war horse. So you take this amazingly powerful and courageous, brave animal, and you turn them into a powerful animal that's under control. A weak horse, a scared horse would be no good on the battlefield. They have to be brave. They have to be courageous. But if they're running around crazy, uncontrolled, it's not going to be good either. Becoming meek is about learning how to control the power that God has given you. It's about learning how to submit your power to God. The perfect example of that is Christ on the cross. Before he went to the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, God, if there's any other way, Father, if I know that what I'm about to go through is going to be tremendously difficult, right? Like more than what we could bear, more than what we could even comprehend. The suffering that Christ went through leading up to the cross and on the cross. While on the cross, or even before the cross, Christ could have wiped everyone out. He had the power to do that. He could have avoided going to the cross. But instead, he submitted his will to the Father. He said, your will be done. That's the perfect example is power under control. Power submitted to the Father. And the final one is grit. Galatians 6:9 says, and let us not grow weary of doing good. For in due season we will reap if we do not give up. And that if we do not give up is really, really important. I've worked with guys where there's years of abuse, years of neglect, years of just really terrible relationship. They start making the changes. They get a month in and they're like, why isn't my wife responding in a positive way? Why does she still not trust me? I've been doing this for a month. Can't she see the change that I made? A month of change does not make up for years and years of neglect and abuse. It takes some time to process. You're going to have to win her trust back again through your action, and not just once or twice, but action over time. And you're going to have to keep going even when you want to give up. This, man, I wish this was just a straight line progression of things just continuing to get better, but that's not the typical path. Usually what we see is things actually get a little bit worse at first. because they're like, why are you doing this? What's the point? It's too late. Why didn't you do this a long time ago? I don't trust that you're going to follow through. You haven't proven to me in the past. You got to push through that initial part. And then a lot of times things seem to get a little bit better. Maybe she starts to warm up a little bit. Maybe some intimacy comes back. And then something happens. Maybe you slip, or maybe just out of the blue, it just turns around and it goes back to, it feels like you went back to square one. You go through that cycle enough times, you're going to want to give up. You're going to feel like maybe it's hopeless. You have to push through that point where you want to give up. That's where the transformation comes. That's where she's going to see the change, because she's going to think like, wow, I expected him to give up at that point. I expected a different response from him at that point. Maybe something is changing where you're going to begin to trust yourself and believe that maybe you can make these changes. But if you give up when things get hard, it's going to be over. She's going to say, see, I knew it. I knew you couldn't follow through. The other thing to keep in mind is, what do your wedding vows say? I know mine said, until death do us part. So if you're still alive, if you're watching this video, I know you're alive. If you're still alive, it's not time to give up. And that's really, really difficult at times. Really difficult. That's why surrounding yourself with a group of men who can help lift you up at those times is going to be critically important for you. That's why armoring up in the armor of God, daily basis, prayer, scripture study, worship, all those things are critical for you to be able to push through this battle and become stronger on the other side. All right, guys, I'm so glad that you watched the video. Excited to have you here. And watching a video is not going to do anything at all. If you tell your wife, hey, I watched a video about how to be the man, she's going to say, great. So what? You got to take action. So let's talk about that. How do we begin to apply some of these things? Be courageous. I want you to list out, what are the fears that are holding you back from being the man that she needs you to be? What are those fears? What are those insecurities? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of conflict? Are you afraid that maybe you're just not good enough and trying is going to prove that? Then I want you to identify and take action on something that you've been afraid to do. Maybe that's having a certain conversation with her. Whatever that fear is, I want you to take action. That's the only way for you to push through that. And when you get to the other side, after you do the thing that you're afraid of, you're going to look back and go, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Be humble. What does 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10 mean to you? I want you to read that passage a few times. What's that mean to you? What does it mean that when you're weak, then you're strong? What does it mean to boast in your weaknesses? That doesn't sound like a manly thing to do. What weaknesses are you afraid to boast about? What are those things that you're holding inside that you don't want to expose? By exposing those things, it's going to help you to not feel so defensive. That's where defensiveness comes from, is where we're trying to protect those fears and those insecurities inside of us. When we let them out and we say, you know, you're right. I haven't been the man that you've needed me to be. I have been afraid of conflict. I haven't been stepping it up as much as I should. When you admit to those things, you get them out in the open. You don't have to defend them anymore. You don't have to protect them anymore. It's going to help you to show up your conversation a lot better. Be meek. How are you doing with having power? God has given you power. Okay, he's given you strength. He's given you a deeper voice, maybe a louder voice, right? You could force your way if you wanted. Are you passive? Do you sit back and just kind of watch things happen? Do you let her lead where you should be leading? Do you suppress your emotions? Right? A lot of men feel like anger is the only acceptable emotion for a man. Well, I'm going to tell you, God gave you emotions. They're for a tool. They're useless, though, if they're out of control. How are you doing with controlling that power? Do you react out of emotion? Do you use your power to get what you want? Or do you submit to God's will? In what ways can you become more meek? In what ways can you submit that power to the will of God? In what ways can you begin to control that power a little bit more? And finally, have grit. I want you to read Galatians 6:9 every morning and every night. Remind yourself to not give up. Do not give up. I mean, write it on post-it notes and put it on the back of the door. So every time you walk out the door, you see it. Put it on the dashboard in your car. Do not give up. The most important thing, guys. If you give up, it's going to be over. Then I'd like you to read The Man in the Arena each day for the next week. And then after you've read that, this will make a little bit more sense. In what areas of your life are you sitting on the sidelines? And then I want you to identify and take some steps to get into the arena, to not give up, keep pushing when things get hard. All right, guys, take your time on this. Okay. It's a process. You're not going to just all of a sudden overnight have these four core characteristics. Maybe one or two of them you've actually got, going pretty well. But figure out which of those areas do you need to work on and begin working on it. Don't rush the process. It takes consistency over time. Keep working on these things day by day. All right, guys. See you in the community. Talk soon. Bye.